Today I want to ask the question, is Radiant Regeneration a good item in Deadlock? Hey everyone, this is Connor here at Dead Unlocked, and this one actually is next up because of a, kind of by popular demand, we ran a poll on the channel. This one got the most votes of a few items I've been looking at. And so today I want to go through kind of asking if this is a good item by asking 5 core questions. What does the item do? What hero should you buy it on? What game situation should you buy it in? Is it a core or situational item? And then again, finally, is it a good item? So we're going to start off with all that today. As a reminder though, because this was something that was a post on the channel, if you want to see more posts like that, kind of participate in what we do on the channel, be sure to subscribe. We also have memberships open. We got our first member today, so super excited to kind of get memberships more rolling. The more members we get, the more cool stuff we'll do for you all. So yeah, let's get right into it with what does Radiant Regeneration do? All right, so we'll start off here. Again, Radiant Regeneration is a 3200 spirit item. It builds from Mystic Regeneration, and it has just about the same passive as Mystic Regeneration, except for one core difference that we'll take a look at. So, the inherent passive on Radiant Regeneration is dealing spirit damage to enemy heroes, grants you bonus health regen, stacks when dealing damage to different heroes. This is a 4 health per second regeneration, and that lasts for 5 seconds. The only difference between Radiant Regeneration and Mystic Regeneration, its 800 cost kind of counterpart, is that this does not scale with spirit, and this one does. So you can actually increase over the course of the game how much healing you get in that 5-second window. And Radiant Regeneration actually adds a second passive as well. This one has a 6-second cooldown, but this is heal and gain bonus movement speed for a short duration when you cast an ability. You get 70 healing on ability cast, 2 meters per second move speed. This lasts for 3 seconds. So this is kind of, again, the breakdown of what you get from this item. It is 3200, it's in the spirit section, but this really is a kind of healing spirit sustain item, which begs the question, what hero should you buy it on? All right, so what hero should you buy Radiant Regeneration on? I'll make sure and keep the items details on screen so you can kind of have a reference point, but we have to ask ourselves the basic question of, we know what it does, but what is the purpose of the item? And kind of what heroes does it synergize well with based on what the item provides? So the item provides things that when, something happens with the item, when you deal spirit damage, bonus is when you deal it to multiple enemies with the core passive, and then you're getting healing and movement speed out of the other passive. That's kind of the core things you're getting. Obviously, by investing 3200, you're also just getting spirit power passively, as with any spirit item. So we want to look at some heroes that are dealing maybe splash damage with their spirit, with their abilities in particular, and then heroes that are generally looking to scale with spirit overall, and also heroes that benefit from some healing. So maybe ones, if you're a pure backline hero, this might not be the one for you, but if you're doing at least a mix of some brawling, this could be a great item for you. So let's look immediately at some heroes this could make sense on. Kind of going through the roster, there are a few. There are going to be a lot of heroes for this one that I think could actually make some sense. Let's say you're playing Dynamo, and you're playing the biggest WOG build. I always talk about this build on the channel. I love it. A stomp build, basically. This could really make sense. I mean, you're going to deal probably damage to multiple people. The only problem with Dynamo, and the reason I would play Devil's Advocate immediately against my own pick here, is that Dynamo only has one ability that's going to be proccing Radiant Regeneration outside of maybe, I guess, his ult if it procs it. But his stomp is the only thing proccing it. So with a hero like Dynamo, you probably actually don't necessarily want to run this item because you want to be able to, especially with that first passive in the early game, let's say you have Mystic Regeneration that you're building into Radiant with, you want to be able to hit multiple heroes quite a bit with abilities, which is why a hero like Lady Geist is so good for Radiant Regeneration. So there was a short stint in the pro meta where folks were rushing this item on Lady Geist. I think maybe even first item or second item. And this is because it works so well with her kit. Even Mystic Regeneration, the 800 cost counterpart, really helps Geist in the early game to sustain, and you're trying to do spirit damage anyway, so you want to get that extra spirit output. Really helps her to kind of stay healing, all those kinds of things. Kelvin is another one you could easily buy this with. Now, 2 of his abilities will proc this: Grenade and Ice Beam. Ice Path obviously doesn't do much for it, but he would I feel like benefit from kind of what this ability does. The healing, movement speed. Those are things that all Kelvins are happy to have. But I do feel like maybe this is a little bit less optimal on Kelvin than, let's say, it is for Geist. That being said, though, if you're ultra into a healing build for Kelvin, having things like healing booster or whatnot, this can all scale and benefit from that as well. And you're probably going to be investing in spirit to some degree unless you're playing gun Kelvin, so could definitely make sense. Some other ones, though. I mean, you can kind of go down the list here. There are several maybe on a lash, probably not, though. Just not one I feel like you get a ton of value of. I'm probably skipping over some important ones. Pocket, I would say you could experiment with running this item on. I feel like, though, at least currently in the meta, a lot of pocket builds are pretty airtight. Like, you just need to run the same, like, 6 items on almost every build with pocket. We're talking about, like, Mystic Leap, or Majestic Leap, sorry. Cold Front, Enchanters, you get Transcendent cooldown pretty fast. A lot of times you run a Cult of Sacrifice, even though with the nerfs, it's maybe a little bit less optimal. I think you could pull off a Radiant Regeneration, though, with Pocket. A lot of his abilities are doing this kind of spirit damage. It would give him some early game, heal and sustain as well, so Pocket could be one you look to run this on. I think another really interesting one to talk about is 7. 7 is a good example of why I feel like it's important to note that it really depends on kind of the archetype of the hero when you're talking about this item. 7 is usually so far in the back line and very like mid-range to long range, so I don't think he's going to get as much benefit from this. That being said, though, sustaining the early game as 7 would be really nice, and he's been nerfed, it feels like, every patch for the last 6 months, so like things that can give him a little bit more movement speed and sustain throughout the early to mid game could be good. This could be an interesting one to run on him, especially because, I mean, almost all of his abilities will proc it. You're going to be dealing spirit damage to enemies constantly, and so you're going to have that nice bonus health regen. This could be a sneaky early game and mid game way to play 7 to give him some good sustain. This is probably better for what it's worth for like a ball build or a storm surge build, not necessarily for an ult build, because the ult build, again, you're only getting one instance of it out of the ult. May not be quite as good. Some others, though. Sinclair, maybe. I think Victor, you could definitely run this on. I think that would help him with his healing uptime and all that as well. I actually think, though, one of my favorite heroes for this ability, and we're going to take a look at this more later, but is actually Viscous. I think Viscous, even though the cube is not an ability that will proc this, obviously, getting Radiant Regeneration going off of his splatter in particular is so good. And it's worth noting that the second passive, heal and gain bonus movement speed for a short duration when you cast an ability, that part does proc off cube. I played a game recently where I was running Radiant Regeneration on Viscous early on, and it felt really good. I mean, I would get down to half health, I would cube, and I would get all of the healing from cube plus the passive from this, and it just felt like I was back up to full in no time. And so with that second passive in mind, like I'm talking about here, any hero that is cycling abilities and using that 6-second passive on cooldown as much as possible really could make some sense for Radiant Regen, which is also, I feel like, why we have to talk about Yamato. I think this could be a sneaky good item for Yamato. I don't see it built on her a lot, but I actually think this one can make a lot of sense. You want to sustain, you're spamming abilities, you're dealing spirit damage with your abilities. To me, this makes a lot of sense. You could maybe run this maybe on the new age, Spirit Viper, maybe. Warden is another candidate for this, if you're hitting a lot of flasks in particular. But all in all, we're looking for, if I had to give like my top 3 or something, maybe, it's probably Viscous, Geist, and then it might be like a toss-up for like a Kelvin or a Yamato or something like that. Maybe even like a Doorman. Again, think of any hero in this game that is dealing probably some kind of splash or AoE spirit damage, and then heroes that are looking to have a blend of frontline and kind of mid-range, that way that you're getting some kind of value off of the consistent slower healing, the regen style healing versus burst. And then also, obviously, heroes that want to build spirit. So I think those 3 check all the boxes, but let's take a look at specific game situations that might call for Radiant Regen. I want to take a look at a game from yesterday I played where I felt like Radiant Regeneration was huge for me, especially in the early to mid game. I feel like I talk about early to mid game a lot with this item, not because it falls off in the late game, just because you're not noticing it quite as much. But I mean, when you're in the early game and you have 800 health or 1,000 health or something, and you get taken down to 300 or 400 health, being able to recuperate that in the course of like a minute or 2 feels really, really good, especially on a character like Viscous, where you can cube, get the healing on ability cast from the second passive, and then obviously get the healing from your own cube as well. And you're just spamming abilities constantly as Viscous. You usually can hit enemies with them. Splatter's pretty easy to hit, so it felt really good. In lane, I had a Bebop that was rushing Veilwalker, doing the classic, Bebop Veilwalker bomb build, and we played really well in lane. We went up against an Abrams and a Doorman that ended up obviously becoming much stronger than us and kind of taking over, but we won the lane. We got Guardian first. We, I think, had more kills. We had several eliminations on them. And I actually think Radiant Regeneration was a huge reason for this. So number one being, I had a huge spirit investment right away. I had no green or orange items, no weapon or vitality items, and for quite a ways, because I went Radiant Regeneration, I think Mystic Burst, and I can't remember the other one. But I went heavy spirit, and the idea with using an item like this is you kind of use this item as a green item, because you got to think about it. Obviously you're dealing way more damage, so you're able to oppress way harder with these kind of spirit abilities. But you also are healing off of it, so you don't necessarily have to invest in those green items right away. I obviously did. I wanted things like Enchanter's Emblem, Reactive Barrier became very good. I kind of just bought some other green items in the late game to kind of become more stocky, but still, this item felt really good, especially into a lane like this. Doorman is pressuring us quite a bit. Doorman's just very strong. He was on a gun build, which was wild to deal with. And then obviously the Abrams, when Bebop would hook someone, a lot of times I was having to cube Bebop because he was getting rushed by Doorman and Abrams and everyone was in his face. I encountered the same pressure, and Radiant Regen honestly helped me to sustain a lot. When you're looking to play this item in-game, usually I like to say, oh, okay, because of how the enemy team is built, I'm definitely going to buy this item. This is a little bit different. I'm talking a lot about like what Bebop and I did in this game, because I feel like it matters so much more what you're trying to accomplish with your build when you're going to buy this item. So again, for me, I was trying to build an ultra spirit heavy build early. I maxed splatter first, so I top tier splatter right away, because I'm trying to essentially keep myself sustained, be a little bit tanky through spirit items versus going, heavier into vitality items. For me, that is how this item can really work. Let me actually show some gameplay really quick of kind of what this looked like in lane. So looking in game here, I think there are moments where items really matter, especially as they allow you, healing items like this can really allow you to press tempo and keep tempo really high. And that is a super valuable asset in the early game, is constant kind of unrelenting pressure in the other lane. So we're at the 9-minute and 50-second mark. We're pretty far into the game already. No Guardians have been taken yet though, so things are moving maybe somewhat slow. And I have a Radiant Regeneration, Mystic Burst, Mystic Expansion, and I just got Enchanter's Emblem. We had just made a little dive on the tower. We're kind of clearing wave, doing some damage, and now I'm somewhat low in health. I'm like a little bit above half health, and I want to just kind of show you all how quickly an item like Radiant Regeneration can have an effect on your game. So let's kind of watch here. So I use Cube, just kind of self-cube here, get a passive healing from the healing minion, and have, look at the regeneration slowly regenning more and more. And then by the time we're going back in, we're already at just about full health. So again, there wasn't, and this wasn't even like the full potential of the item. This is just one ability cast and what that was able to do for me. But in this fight, I'm able to stay in. I get Mystic Burst there. That's some Radiant Regeneration healing right there. We're able to kind of continue fighting in this fight because of this. So that second engage they made right after we had pushed Walker, that kind of probably for a lot of you didn't look that risky. Why am I talking about this kind of a thing? Well, if I had been in the position where I was still at 700 health and they had collapsed on me like that, there's a really good chance I would have died. But because of, obviously, you're playing Viscous Cube is a great asset to have, even just for a quick heal. It's not crazy healing, but for a quick heal. But because I get the boosted healing on ability cast from Radiant Regen, which scales with boons, by the way, so as I progress through the game, that healing gets better. That healing, I did maybe one or two instances of the initial passive with Radiant Regen, doing some damage to the enemy players. All of that put me right back up to full health. I felt no pressure in that fight to do really anything, and a clean disengage was able to happen. We have the Guardian at this point at 1 health, and so we're able to I think, the next fight we roll this. But again, a little moment, but that's a lot of what you're talking about with items like Radiant Regeneration are the little moments where it's like, oh, I'm all of a sudden back up to full health and I didn't even realize it. That's the kind of thing in Deadlock that can allow you to push tempo so much. It's the same reason why we talk about Fortitude being a really good item, especially back in the day, for a lot of the mid game, because it allows you to continue to roam around the map and do jungling and, and kind of stay active. Radiant Regen is a lot of the same thing, but with kind of a more spirit-heavy lean. But let's take a look at kind of, is this a core situational item? How should we talk about how this integrates into your builds? All right, is Radiant Regen a core situational item? let's take a look at some examples of where it could be certainly a core item. And that's in a build like this. We've got a Lady Geist build here. It is Sammy's Bomb Geist, huge bomb buffs, great little build. This is a nice, very simple, easy to follow build. But what this one does, it sets you up right away to kind of become a Spirit Demon in the early game. So you get your extra regen, you get Mystic Regeneration. Those two items right away can help you to sustain. And then it's doing very similar to what I did of my Viscous build. They're very similar builds conceptually. I didn't go extra Spirit, I didn't go extra Regen, but I used the rest of these items in the early game to kind of, again, push that pace. This is so good, especially for Lady Geist in the early game, because of the healing it provides. So for a hero like Lady Geist, I would say, if you're playing a Spirit build with Geist, this should almost always be a core item, to me. Now, there's certainly some cases to be made for it not being that. If you want to go more damage heavy, maybe there's like an earlier investment, like a Tank Buster or a Surge of Power over Radiant Regen. But sustain, for the same reason when we talked about that Viscous clip, Geist needs tempo early to do anything but become irrelevant. You don't want your Geist low health before getting ult and just having to stand behind Walker and take damage every time she uses an ability. Radiant Regen and a lot of these items in this build really help you to mitigate that. So in a build like this, I would say it can definitely be core when you need that sustain, especially in the early game. All right, now, on the other hand, here is a Kelvin build that is, I think its clear purpose is to have grenades, be healing, and doing as much damage as possible. This is a more like support-heavy Kelvin build. I would actually say, this is not my build, this is a Cyrano's build here, but I would say this is one where you could really make a case for Radiant Regeneration being a kind of like, maybe down here in this alternate, supplemental, situational item slot. Because I think this is the kind of build that really makes sense. Kelvin wants to heal, Kelvin wants to keep pressure up, support his teammates, but Kelvin also wants to do damage here. And there's a lot of stuff in this build, this stage 3 becomes stronger here, as they say. I think this is where if you were to lean in this build into a little bit more of a, like, I want to not become a carry. I don't think Kelvin should necessarily be a carry in your games. But maybe I'm on the higher end of the soul count and I need to be providing some more damage for my team and also keeping myself sustained a little bit. Radiant Regeneration can make a ton of sense here. You would have healing from your grenades that you could cast on yourself. Radiant Regen, especially if you're hitting people in a splash zone, would give you a ton of healing. I mean, you could stay upright as Kelvin for really long stretches of time with this item. It's actually surprising me that more people don't run this item on Kelvin. It really suits, especially if you're playing more like aggressively with Ice Path and getting in people's faces and grenading maybe at your feet a lot of the time. This is a build that really feels like it could complement, Radiant Regeneration. Those two could work well together. Now, I would not say Radiant Regen is a core item in this build. I think there are way too many items in the build. Just personally, builds like this overwhelm me, even if they are just meant to lay out options. But I just don't think that a self-heal on ability hit is like a core thing for Kelvin. Kelvin's trying to heal his teammates and trying to help the whole team win. But like I said, there are going to be some moments where you're playing Kelvin, you need to take over a little bit more. I think Radiant Regen could be a great kind of supplemental situational item, and that's really how I would think about this item in a lot of cases, is are you struggling to maintain health in the early game? Do you want to go spirit heavy? Are you going to be frontlining at least to some degree, or at least in fights where you need ticking healing? I think that Kelvin checks all those boxes. And I think this item would work wonders on Kelvin. Like I said, I think more people should run this. But, at the end of the day, core or situational is going to be up to you and your build and what you're trying to achieve in the game. Just know that if you're looking at certain heroes like the ones I've talked about, you might at least consider it as a situational item, if not making it a core item in your build. But last but not least, is this a good item? So like I said, last but not least, is Radiant Regeneration a good item? I would say hell yeah it is. I think this item is really, really good. For so many reasons. So let's talk about, again, with Deadlock, we don't have set support heroes just yet. So every game, you're going to be looking at maybe 1 or 2 players on your team to maybe buy a healing item, a situational healing item. Maybe you have a Dynamo on your team, or a Page, or maybe even a support Kelvin, something that can help you to sustain. But a lot of games, especially in matchmaking, you don't have that. Like in my lane that I talked about in my game, it was Viscous Bebop. I'm kind of the support, but I also wanted in that game to be kind of like a spirit carry. I wanted to be, throwing my splatters around, doing a lot of damage. I also needed to sustain in that situation, and Bebop was not going to help me. We were going up against Abrams Doorman. It was going to be a frustrating lane if I couldn't keep my health up. An item like this is the perfect key to that. It gives me extra spirit, allows me to heal, and honestly kind of rewards me for targeting enemy heroes with my spirit abilities, which is a great way to kind of poke as Viscus in the early game. So I think this is a really, really good item. I think pros have started using, I mean, pros use this in and out, you know, kind of depending on the meta and what items are really, really optimized. But I think when this item is good, it's really good. And I think in matchmaking, this is a super, super good item, because the unfortunate truth is a lot of times in matchmaking, you have to do what's best for yourself. It's just an unfortunate reality that the team is not going to play optimally in a lot of situations. You know, ideally at higher levels, you're calming and you're working some of this stuff out, but in especially like a lower mid elo, an item like this that can help keep you sustained is a really, really good thing. Tempo is so important in the early game and in the mid game. This item allows for that. Healing is good in Deadlock almost all the time. And so for me, I would definitely say Radiant Regeneration is a good item. But that's going to do it for this one. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Like I said, if you want to kind of be a part, I'd like to let the community kind of decide which items we cover here. At least give like an offering of a few that I've had kind of on my radar. So if you want to be a part of that, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of those posts on the YouTube channel. And yeah, we have memberships open. We just got our first member today. I'm super, super stoked. Thank you for joining. And as always, thank you all so much for tuning in. From our house to yours, we'll see you all next time here at Dead Unlocked.